Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from the Golisano Foundation, supporting Move to Include programming on WXXI and working with the community to lead change toward the inclusion of people with intellectual and physical disabilities. Share your thoughts at movetoinclude.org.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made with a family trip to the library. A young boy, his siblings, and his parents packed into the car and drove to their local library, one in the greater Rochester area. The kid's father, an avid videographer, documented that trip on tape. He captured some of the children looking through the shelves and choosing books, and then his son, who was using a wheelchair, not being able to navigate the aisles. They weren't wide enough for the wheelchair. Little did he know that this moment would change the 8-year-old boy's life. That boy, Conan Gillis, is now a PhD candidate at Cornell University and a self-advocate. He has used his experiences, including that one at the library when he was a child, to push for access and equity when it comes to spaces, educational environments, and more. Gillis shares his story in his own words in the 4th episode of the Move to Include podcast, hosted by WXXI's Noelle Evans. We'll hear the full episode this hour, and then we're going to talk about the lessons we can learn from Gillis and from his experiences. I also want to let you know, you're going to hear the episode 4th one right now. If you have not listened to the previous 3, please find them. We're very proud of them. WXXI has been doing great work on this, Noelle Evans and the folks involved here. And I'll turn it over to Noelle now.
This is the Move to Include podcast. I'm Noelle Evans. Before Conan Gillis was a mathematician or an advocate, he was an 8-year-old kid who just wanted to use his local library. But the aisles were too narrow for his wheelchair, and the building just wasn't built with him in mind. With help from his family, Conan turned that experience into advocacy. Now, Conan is a PhD candidate, and he's had to speak up for himself throughout his education. From K through 12 classrooms with formal support plans to the more self-directed world of higher education. Those experiences helped shape how he thinks about disability, less about the individual and more about the environment around us. In this conversation, we talk about self-advocacy, the role of family, and what it really means to build systems that work for more people. Conan, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
To start, do you mind sharing where your journey with self-advocacy began?
Sure. I think I was about 8 years old, thereabouts. And my local public library in Honeywood Falls, where I'm from, they were building a new one. The old one was not really wheelchair accessible. It was in the sense that I could get in the door, but even when I was young and I had a child-sized wheelchair, I couldn't really navigate through the shelving, and it was really hard for me to even get a book off the shelves. And there were other issues with the building that just made it not exactly inviting for people in wheelchairs. And I was old enough to recognize it, young enough to not really know what to do. My parents, my dad is a incorrigible videographer of my family. Throughout my life, he's been filming us doing various interesting things. Yep. He filmed a video he called A Family Trip to the Library, where he put me and my 2 younger siblings in the car. My mom was driving, he was filming. And they were asking us questions as the car was moving, interesting cinematography, about what do you like about the library? Why do you want to go to the library? Questions that you could ask any 8-year-old and they'd have some sort of interesting answer to give. And then we arrived at the library and he filmed my siblings and also me going through, checking out a book, having trouble reaching a book, having trouble turning my chair around. My siblings grabbing a book, going through the normal tasks of checking a book up from the library. It was an interesting moment because I was born with my disability and had many health complications throughout my life. My parents had been indispensable advocates for me up to that point. But this was the first time I was ever, from an advocacy perspective, actively engaged in the process.
Was there something in you that changed, whether it was your worldview or how you viewed yourself, or, what was going to be the next piece of self-advocacy for you? I mean, at 8, I know it's a young age, and, you can feel pretty powerful at 8, too, I think, if people show you what you're capable of.
Yeah, I think it sort of set the tone, I think, for a lot of my personal approach to self-advocacy. And to give some context, most of what I need, not all, are physical accommodations that are in some ways, I don't want to say obvious, but easy to see. Once you point them out, it's easy to say, oh, Conan can't get through the shelves. They're too narrow. Of course, they're too narrow. Or Conan can't get in the building. There's no ramp.
They're like tangible.
Yeah, tangible. Yeah, they're very tangible. And we as a society do have a somewhat well-developed vocabulary around physical accommodations. At least I've been fortunate that when I have asked, people go, oh yeah, why don't we have that? Oh yeah, we should have that. And many other people who live in different contexts, different personal contexts, different social contexts, don't have that privilege or that luck or whatever one may wish to ascribe it to. It's probably both. Probably both, if I had to guess. But for me, the notion of, if you point out the issue confidently, you can at least start the conversation to get things done. It's never that simple. It's never been that simple for me. But that video and the conversation it sparked, the key really was starting that conversation, to me, in that context. And a lot of the time when I've done advocacy in high school, I advocated for some handicap access buttons to be put on the main entrance doors, the doors of the main entrance. The predominant response that I got was, we don't have those. We should have those. Why don't we have those? Let's have those.
Okay.
And it taught me the lesson that if you ask it in a certain way, if you ask it politely but confidently, people will listen. And again, I want to reiterate, this is only my experience in one lifetime, in one state, in one region of one state, within one family. So, all of those qualifications have to be borne in mind.
From what you've just been saying, can you share how that's shown up for you in education? Or how you've shown up for yourself, I guess?
Sure. There's a big leap when it comes to disability in education from going to high school and going to college.
Okay.
High school is, both have significant federal and state oversight regulations, requirements for accommodations and such. The high school and before, middle school, elementary school levels, at least in public schooling, you have things like IEPs or 504s. They don't exist in college. It's much less, I suppose one could say, scripted.
Okay.
The requirements are there, but it's not like there's a special ed teacher who is assigned to you, and you have meetings every so often. At least this was my experience. You have meetings every so often, and the principal and vice principal is required to attend. None of that. It's basically there's an office at your school, which can be well or poorly supported, that's required to give you the accommodations that are required by law, and also whatever other ones your school may deign to grant you. And that really leads into self-advocacy in a major way, because for me to go to college, or for an individual with disabilities to go to college.
You are currently a PhD candidate at Cornell University, right?
Yes. And I did my bachelor's at Cornell as well. So really the one big jump I've had educationally has been from high school to Cornell. And I'll never forget my first tour of campus. We went there, went on the usual college tour. We were driving home. Dad and I looked at each other and went, nope. Too
Why?
hilly.
Too what?
Hilly.
Okay.
Cornell is in Ithaca, New York. Wonderful town. Beautiful town. Hilly
I hear
town.
it's gorgeous. Yeah. They do say.
They say it's gorgeous,
Many a
and they're
gorge.
right.
Yeah.
It is both gorgeous and so many gorges, so many hills. When you're in a wheelchair looking up at these hills, trying to navigate these hills, it was terrifying. But I applied because I lived 2 hours away and I was applying to a bunch of schools. Why not? But then I got in and we were like, oh boy. Now we have to see if this is possible.
It seems like it is.
Yeah, it is.
What has made it possible?
There were three things that came to play. One is a well-resourced school that's able to make accommodations in other schools. We looked at them, we talked to them, would have not easily been able to make. And the other schools were equally motivated, equally well-intentioned, equally everything. It's just the brute fact of the bottom line.
Okay.
Second was my parents were able to literally take time out of their lives for 9 years to be my nurse half-time so that I could live in Ithaca. And that has not been easy.
Can we explore that a bit? Because I recall you saying before, in terms of like having direct support, that it's pretty limited on how many days and how your family has had to, how you and your family have compensated for that.
Yes. So I'm eligible through New York Medicaid for 24/7 nursing care. I require, medically speaking, 24/7 nursing care. There are not enough nurses that I could find, not through lack of trying. There are not enough nurses in Ithaca who are at least looking for work to support me having 24/7 nursing care. Mm-hmm. We've gotten it right now so that I have nursing care about 4 or 3.5 days a week. My father drives to and from Rochester to Ithaca every week to make up the difference. There have been some weeks where he lives with me all week. There has been only 1 week where I haven't seen him. I love my father. I want to see him once a week. It is good to see him once a week. But I don't like having him make these drives every week. Mm-hmm. And I don't say this with any regret, because he doesn't regret it, I don't believe. He's never voiced it to me, at least. And I'm not going to waste the opportunity he's given me by regretting it, by regretting him giving it to me. I want to make the most of it. But back to your question, if and when my father is no longer able to be involved, it literally makes a difference between having a job and a career and a life or living in a hospital. It could happen to me someday.
Like, what are the options?
Yeah.
If and when? Yeah.
Yeah. And the moment that happens, I lose my autonomy. My mother deserves no less praise. She's kept the family together. And my siblings as well. They had to put up with my blabbermouth for 26 years.
We talked about that transition from high school to college. What about preparing for that transition from completing your PhD to what your career may look like?
The number one constraint is, where do I get a job? Which, pursuing an academic career, many people end up crisscrossing the country. I've applied to jobs in Tennessee, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, California, New York, Massachusetts.
Casting a wide net here. Okay. So you're not limiting yourself based on like where your family is or anything like that, it sounds like, at the moment.
That'll come next.
Okay.
I would say mostly my applying to those jobs is me going, la, 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 to any issues that will arise.
To any possible issues that may arise.
I
Okay.
completely ignored all of them. I don't know what accommodations will look like. The biggest issue will be, the two biggest issues are issues that a workplace can't really help me with. I need an accessible apartment, and I need nursing.
So these considerations are, that sort of that wider space of, again, like the systemic or structural elements to this, which as I understand it, we talked before about the definition of disability for you, not necessarily sitting with the individual, but within the environment. Is that fair to say?
There are two prevailing concepts of disability. You have the medical model of disability, which is that disability is a individual defect or problem that ought to be cured or mitigated by medical means, and that it's the individual's responsibility to do so with the assistance of the medical system. Then there's the social model of disability, which, to give a concrete example, my legs don't function like yours do, obviously. The medical model of disability would say, oh, Conan's disabled, he can't walk. The social model of disability says, Conan is disabled only insofar as buildings don't have elevators and ramps. It's essentially saying that the disability lies not in the impairment, but in the disconnect between the individual and the society. Being, say, nearsighted is much less of a disability if glasses are universally accepted, provided, whatever. I say much less. It becomes a non-disability, I think. I'm not nearsighted. I don't want to speak for anyone, but
I am, and I can say that, wearing the glasses or wearing contacts, it's a non-issue with the nearsightedness,
And the social model would, I think, hold that, okay, if glasses were not socially acceptable, or if you weren't allowed to read anything up close, because that was considered some weakness or social failing, that would disable you more than the mere fact that your eyes function differently than mine.
When we have the technology to correct that.
Technology is an important part of it, I think. Corrections, the medical model tries hard to correct things in a sense of make them disappear or make no one have to worry about it.
Correcting vision, I see it, I hear it.
There's no real way to correct my legs. There are ways to make it so that I can interface with society seamlessly, regardless. The social model would, I think, prompt us more to focus on those things. And neither of these things are monoliths. There are people, the medical model was sort of implicit in most of the early 20th century. It became explicit when people who invented the social model figured out that's what the medical system was doing. And this was during the heyday of institutionalization. There are still people alive who survived the Nazi eugenics movements and such. So that's the context where that was described and really pointed at as a major force societally. The social model was developed in response to it. They're not monoliths. People have problems with both of them. For example, the social model doesn't, for example, account for things like pain.
Pain.
It can be argued, not everyone agrees with this, I don't even know if I do. It can be argued that pain can be disabling. It can be it is relevant to the disabled experience, but it isn't the result of society not accommodating something or constructing a barrier for someone. It's there. It's something more immediate. And there are other aspects as well of disability, of the social model, that it has done a lot of good work. And what I just said, I don't mean to discredit it. It's just there are other aspects of disability that people are now starting to think about to extend the social model, or perhaps tweak it or go beyond it. Or it's also an academic lens, and academics love tweaking models.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So
endlessly.
So part of what I'm articulating is literally academic, as far as what it means for me in my daily life or somebody in their daily life. It can be very powerful. The social model was a revelation when it first came out, and I'm sure that there are more revelations to come. Whether what I've articulated is the next revelation, I don't quite know.
Sure. How has it sort of shaped the way that you approach your self-advocacy?
Good question. Every building is a product of a society, and that sounds very broad and philosophical, but I mean, we have French architecture, we have Soviet architecture, we have...
You got brutalism.
Yeah. It's not just random chance that buildings in Paris look different than buildings in Moscow or buildings in New York. There is a social aspect to it.
And a cultural, yeah.
Exactly. When I think about self-advocacy, setting aside what we previously discussed about nursing and these broad systemic issues, I don't have idea, one, on how to fix them. Most of my self-advocacy is focused on the more immediate, tangible ramps, buttons, doors, elevators, etc. And with them, it does become really a matter of architecture, and I suppose one could say culture. What sort of buildings do we build?
Who do we consider when we build them?
Exactly.
Or even like the sidewalks, the
Right.
streets. Is this meant for pedestrians? Is this meant for...
When I'm involved in these sorts of conversations, but most of what I've been fortunate enough to be able to do is remind people that they need to consider wheelchair users. And I've been fortunate to be in the spaces and to be listened to in those spaces where that's a relevant question. It's always relevant. Where that question has impact, it results in change.
Okay.
Somewhat.
On a good day, sounds like.
When the planets align and everyone's had their coffee, yes. When you view advocacy on a large scale, you also have to think about long-term goals. Short-term goals are typically obvious because they will have immediate or close to immediate effects for individuals, either letting them do something new or stopping a problem that's been harming or hindering their lives in some way. Ramps, nursing care, deinstitutionalization, all of these things. Problem, solve it. Hopefully people's lives are better. No one can predict the future, but that's the goal and that's the hope. The longer-term goal of society of advocacy is what sort of society do we want to create? Do we want for ourselves, for our kids? But I think, if you want to think about advocacy, if you want to take a longer view about it, you do have to start asking yourself those bigger questions. Because otherwise you're just on a treadmill. There will always be one more building to fix. There will always be one more class that's not, one more accommodation to maintain. Where does it all lead? What is the end goal? It's perfectly okay to say, I'm doing self-advocacy for myself and my life. Like me, I just want to hang out with friends, do math, and listen to good music. That's my goal. Is that selfish? Probably. But
that sounds great. Well, you can't leave out fun.
It is fun. Yeah. That's my goal. And honestly, I want to make the world a better place. I want to help individuals with disabilities around me and after me. That's why I continue advocating, even when I'm no longer impacted. But I don't know what the long-term goal is. I don't even try to fight for something like that, because whatever I propose may not be the right thing. So that's why I tend to focus on the medium to short-term goals. And I think for me, that's the most fulfilling and I think the most useful part of my time. But for people who want to take advocacy to that next level, who actually want to make an impact, and I salute them, I think that's a question they should ask themselves.
Okay.
I don't have an answer for it, but that's what they should have in mind, because if you don't have that, you're just going to be fighting. If you don't have a clear image of what you're fighting for, then you end up just fighting to fight another day, which tragically is what many people are forced to do anyway, but it'd be nicer to have a better goal.
Find that from within yourself, maybe, too. Thank you so much, Conan.
Thank you for having me.
That was Conan Gillis. For more information on self-advocacy, visit our website at movetoinclude.org. You can support this podcast by subscribing or following wherever you listen. Leave us a review and share us on social media. We're at Move to Include. This podcast is produced by WXXI Public Media.
I'm Evan Dawson. This is Connections. When we come back from our only break of the hour, we sit down with the host of the Move to Include podcast, Noelle Evans, and my colleague Sarah Murphy Abbamonte, project manager for Move to Include, join us. We're going to talk about what they have coming up, and we'll talk about the remarkable story of Conan Gillis that you just heard. Let me welcome now to the studio Noelle E. Evans. Noelle is host of the Move to Include podcast and education reporter producer for WXXI News. Hi, welcome to the studio.
Hi, thank you.
And welcome to Sarah Abbamonte, project manager for Move to Include as well. Nice to see you in studio again.
Nice to be here, Evan.
So the story of Conan Gillis, who, by the way, helps us out on the Community Advisory Board.
Sure does.
Yep.
I do the acronyms. A really remarkable story. I was talking to Noelle during our brief break, and I think everybody, whether you use a wheelchair or not, you can relate to the idea of just trying to be in a public space and realizing this aisle is not wide enough for me. I literally can't go down it. I can't be in here and I can't get access.
Yes.
It's so straightforward and so jarring, and you can understand how an 8-year-old, that changes their life. What a powerful story that was.
Yeah, I mean, it also tells you, as he was saying, by design, I don't belong here unless, somebody takes notice and makes an adjustment. Even with when he was talking about being in high school and pointing out that, if the front door entrance has a handicap accessible button, then he doesn't have to wait for somebody else to come and let him in. And when I mean, even going around Rochester and wherever I am, especially after having conversations with folks like Conan, like realizing how glaringly obvious it is. Even with a gym, not being able to enter unless I've seen folks who are like recovering from a stroke not be able to get through the door unless somebody goes out of their way for them. And so when Conan speaks to, that social model of...
Yeah, he talked about sidewalks. There's so many different spaces. And let me ask both of you about this because, obviously, Sarah, this is the work that you do on a regular basis, trying to understand the world we live in and who it's designed for and who it's not designed for. Noelle, design has sort of been like this really big theme so far of this podcast series here. What would you say is a takeaway that you have as you learn more about accessibility when it comes to design in our society?
I mean, that's like the major thread that's stitching together so much of these stories from folks, whether it's talking about housing, whether it's talking about employment, that it's really, and I want to throw this to Sarah, actually, because it's such a huge part of people's experience, and life could be so much different and so much easier for folks to just have some barriers removed for the simple fact of ramps are, a standard thing. Like curb cuts are a standard thing. So, yeah, go for it, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk a lot about the built environment and how the Americans with Disabilities Act and other legislation is really the floor when it comes to accessibility and inclusion. There's concepts of universal and inclusive design that are being brought more and more into the architecture and interior design space. We want to see that grow. But right now, there's not a lot of direction or requirements from different, zoning committees or just internal planning committees as well. So we really want to talk about not just what's the letter of the law, what's compliant, but what is practically accessible. And that goes beyond the physical mobility and into things like cognitive accessibility, sensory inclusive accessibility. So thinking about just anyone who might be walking or rolling into a space and what might they need or what might be a barrier to them accessing that space.
Yeah, and there's something that stood out to me listening to Conan describe. So, for example, take the either having a button or not having a button to get through a door, right? Mm-hmm. And I could imagine a listener thinking, well, okay, but so you have to wait at the door, so someone opens the door for you. But you listen to people like Conan, who is so powerful in telling his own story, and you realize that a big part of it is dignity. It's self-direction, self-advocacy. And yes, I guess someone could open the door for him. But do we want to create the autonomy, the self-direction, frankly, the dignity for folks? I was really moved by him, by your talking to Conan here. It was very powerful stuff, and dignity kept coming to mind for me.
Oh, absolutely. Conan's fabulous, and I hope people continue to listen to more of the episodes that are coming up, because that definitely comes up in a future episode, talking about housing, talking about when you're dealing with intersectionality of identities and someone's pretty much using your disability as a way to exercise a form of neglect because of your race, by ignoring you, but then acknowledging other folks, and so that's something.
Discriminating against you, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, so that's for sure a big, going back to like that thread that weaves through all of this, big time. And, think about for you, like how I don't like necessarily waiting or having my decisions have to be made for me by somebody else.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the dignity piece. How do you see the subject of dignity when it comes to the disability community and what we use laws, norms, culture to say is mandated that is either designed in or allows for people to sort of self-direct, Sarah?
Yeah, it's so important that people have that autonomy and that sense of dignity, that sense of belonging whenever they enter a space. And Noelle had mentioned our housing episode that's upcoming, but also healthcare. I think, Conan got to this a little bit. There's an intimacy level associated with when you have care and support as a person with a disability or someone who's aging or any of those types of relationships. And so making sure that this isn't just a transactional relationship, that there is that care for the individual, that respect for dignity and individuality.
So I want to go back to the opening of the series. I think the first episode was with Stephanie Woodward. Is that right? Was that episode 1?
And
We're on
BJ
episode 4
Savio.
now. There's going to be 6 total.
Mm-hmm.
And when Stephanie she's always so good she makes this point like a blunt hammer that's like, oh, I'm going to remember this. And she's talking about the term, equal marriage and the idea of, what that is and what that is in most people's minds when we talk about marriage equality. And it's like, well, okay, you have a concept of what marriage equality is. Are you thinking about the disability community? You're probably thinking about the LGBTQ community for good reason. But if you're not understanding how marriage hasn't always been equal for the disability community, you're sort of missing what that phrase means and how it applies here. And I wonder if we do the same with healthcare. We think about healthcare for all, Medicare for all, these terms that we have that we think about often. But are we thinking about all? This series has kind of hit me over and over again like, oh, we're not really thinking about everybody. we're thinking in a more narrow sense than we realize. And not maliciously. I mean, like, I'm as guilty as anybody probably of not really having the full picture. So I don't think it's malicious with most people, Sarah. Do you?
No, absolutely. I think most people are well-intentioned, and I would say there's almost a hesitation because they want to do the right thing. They want to say the right thing, but they may not know what that is. So there's a training and a knowledge gap there too, right? But when we talk about healthcare for all and we talk about the financial accessibility, it's also plugged into transportation. Can I get to my doctor's office? Once I get to my doctor's office, is the reception desk configured in a way that I, as a wheelchair user, can come up and interact with the receptionist? Once I get into the exam room, is there the necessary equipment in there to help me get onto the exam table or into the eye exam chair or whatever needs to happen? Is that there? So there's so many different threads of accessibility that weave in and out of all 6 episodes of the podcast.
When you travel for work, as you do sometimes, and you meet colleagues working on these kind of subjects in other places, which we've talked about on this program, do you find that most of the work that you and your colleagues are doing in this space is welcomed? I mean, is it embraced? Are there people, whether they're working in media, whether they're working in the business space or the government space, who are open to the idea that they still have a lot to learn, that they're not putting up walls, or is there sort of a pulling back when these issues are brought up?
I would say I haven't experienced a pulling back, but I do think there's a difference between people who want to genuinely be allies to a community they're not a member of and those that are just looking to perform a checkbox on accessibility. And, you know, we see that a lot. So coming to the table with a sense of humility of the I don't know what I don't know, and engaging with community partners, individuals with disabilities is so, so important. And that's what we kind of hammer home for us here at XXI, but also our partner stations throughout the country.
Yeah, I think to go back to the point about Stephanie, people like Stephanie Woodward, who are advocates, who are community members, who are really powerful leaders, she shows a combination of sort of a demand for change that isn't going to keep waiting, while also showing, I think, just enough grace to say to you, all right, if you didn't get it before, like,
yeah,
now you know. You know, it's like, I've had that feeling with Stephanie when early in my tenure of hosting the show, I learned what the phrase "nothing about us without us" means.
Yes.
And I've never forgotten that.
And one of our earlier episodes before this one was about disaster preparedness with Anita Cameron. And also, I mean, I went into that conversation thinking we were going to talk about how to basically fill in the gap for yourself and your community when, generally speaking, folks with disabilities end up being kind of left behind. And she started it with how to become a first responder. And so that was, for me, like a reframe of, you know, what is possible. And for me, checking myself as to, you know, assuming that perhaps some people can't be in that space, but absolutely you can be.
Was that like one of those, as a journalist, was that like an oh dang moment where it's like, oh, I was not seeing this exactly the right way here?
I have to say those moments for me are actually so exhilarating because I'm just like,
sure,
oh
absolutely.
my gosh, like, let's go deeper. Like, what else don't I know? And that's a fantastic conversation with Anita Cameron, and I highly recommend. I mean, of course, I'm going to recommend listening to this.
Well, I've already done that. You don't have to keep doing. I'll keep doing it for you.
Thank you.
Everybody should
let the people know. And I mean, the other thing about the people know. When it comes to like making spaces accessible, when it comes to like zooming out a bit more, I recently reported on, Autism Up was offering some sensory-friendly DMV appointments. And just by delving into that a little bit, I'm like, man, wouldn't it be so great if the DMV was actually just a bit more comfortable to be in for everybody? And then it even makes me think of like the design of a can opener. Like, when something is designed to help, folks who may have arthritis, like how it benefits kind of everybody. When you consider folks that are out in the margins and you design for them in mind, just how much ease it can put on everybody. So it is arguably a boon.
The can opener thing is a really interesting one to me because that dovetails with a conversation that my colleague Veronica Volk hosted on this program, in which not to talk too much about Stephanie, but Veronica had Stephanie Woodward on at the time when People magazine was featuring Stephanie's family. Mm-hmm. She has 6 children, 5 living children, as she and her husband both use wheelchairs. And, they had triplets along with 2 boys. And it's like, whoa, like, first of all, that is a lot for any human being.
Anyone.
It doesn't matter who you are, what's going on in your life. Like, that's a ton. And then what was, to me, was really cool was seeing the reaction to some of what she had done with socials to show people. People were like, well, you got triplets. You're both using wheelchairs. Like, how do you deal with cribs? It's like, oh, we've got like French doors on the cribs. And like, we've got like, and the amount of people who were like, listen, I don't use a wheelchair, but that is way better. I want that. Like, how do I do that? Similar to the can opener story. It's like, well, I don't have arthritis, but this is a better product for me now. And I think sometimes, Sarah, there's an idea that what the disability community wants, maybe it can be accommodated. It's going to be an inconvenience for everybody. It's going to be a cost for everybody, but maybe it should happen. And they've had to deal in the disability community for decades with people either rolling their eyes or putting up walls or not changing laws under the assumption that, well, this is just going to make everything harder, but I guess we could do it. As opposed to like a good amount of this stuff could actually be good for like everybody.
Oh, absolutely. I think of, to go back to some of the non-mobility related accommodations and fulfilling those access needs, just having an agenda ahead of time or a slide deck ahead of time for your meeting, whether it's in person or virtual, that helps everyone. But it especially helps someone who may have a processing disorder or, may not be able to deal with the fluorescent lights that we have here in the studio, things like that. So some of these things are literally under $100, if any cost at all. It may take you a few more minutes when you're prepping for an event or a meeting, but they can be done very easily. You need to have that conversation between whomever is facilitating and the person with the disability to make sure you actually are meeting the access need and not meeting what you think the access need is.
Yeah, we recently had a conversation about what has changed and what is happening for people who are hearing impaired, the deaf community. And so we had a guest in the studio at a cochlear implant. Kind of amazing to me that 12 years into hosting, Megan Mack, was that the first guest we've ever had with a cochlear implant in the studio? I think it was because, initially you're figuring out, okay, well, we've got a guest in studio. They cannot use headphones because of the way the cochlear implant interacts with their brain and their everything going on. Headphones is not the way. So, okay, no problem. He didn't wear the headphones. But now we've got remote guests. So he needs the headphones. Well, we hadn't thought of that. And on the fly, this amazing team, whose names you almost never hear from me and you should hear more often, including the people in tech and IT. I mean, it was all hands on deck figuring out like, okay, we didn't have this figured out. We thought we did. And we came up with a solution and it worked out really well. The next time, it's going to be totally different because now we've done it and we've experienced that. Mm-hmm. And I don't look at it as like anything other than I am so glad that we have figured this out and that we've worked through it. I wish I would have thought more about that beforehand, not knowing how cochlear implants work. And that was on me. Like I own that mistake, but I learned a lot from that mistake as part of the leader of a team who does amazing work every day to try to be more accessible. So we could have, I think, Sarah, taken the lesson from that as like, well, that was hard, or we weren't prepared, or
let's never do that again.
That's the problem. Is
exactly.
When you go, well, the lesson is like, don't do that.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, no, we figured the accommodation out. I wish I had not made the mistake of not knowing what to do in full beforehand, but it was my mistake. The team figured it out. And now we can do it again. Like we can do it every day of the week if we want to.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you remember, Evan, but the first 2 weeks we were live streaming connections to YouTube. We had on different panels, we had deaf guests who needed ASL interpretation. Yep. And we had to figure out with the cameras here in the studio where best everyone should be positioned so that we can make sure that not only the guest in studio can see the interpreter, but that our YouTube audience could also see the interpreter. And we did that on the fly as well. I mean, week 1 out of the gate, you guys are amazing. So we're just making it happen. And I think a lot of that is up to the XXI attitude and internal culture of we make this a place where you belong and you are welcome. We want you here. We're going to do what we need to make that happen.
And how can we possibly serve the public if we're not serving everyone?
Exactly.
That's it. I mean, one of the guests on the program, when we were talking about living with a cochlear implant, he said that when he is in company meetings, they have an ethos. He's at PBS. He was just here. He has the ethos at PBS is like, if this doesn't work for everybody, it's not working for anybody, and we're not going forward until everyone can hear or access. So if it doesn't work for you, you got to let us know, and we're not moving forward without that.
Yeah, just start your meeting virtual or in person with an access check. Can everyone hear? Can everyone see? Does everyone have what they need to be successful for the next 45 minutes to an hour?
Real straightforward, right?
Yep.
And most of the time, probably the answer is yes. But when it is not, it's probably a surprise and it's eye-opening, and then you can deal with it. As opposed to someone who has to probably, and again, Sarah is someone who's been in the disability community. My guess is there's a mix of reactions, but not everybody is going to put their hand up and say like, wait, some people will tell you that they feel isolated, they feel left out, excluded, and
or even shame for speaking up about it.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't want to be like seen as annoying.
Oh,
which
actually,
is
like I
problem,
do have
course.
so let's stop everything so I can, and the amount of stigma attached to having, maybe something that's considered like an exceptional need. Like, I know things are shifting a bit in some realms, but that can be really difficult to like call yourself out,
Which is why when Sarah models how to do that as the leader should do that, then the person doesn't have to do that. And then all of a sudden the weight is not on the person with the disability to have to all of a sudden stop everything and go like, excuse me. So,
or even having it one-on-one.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We always put my contact information out there. So if you're attending one of our events, if you're coming in for a meeting, if you're a guest on Connections, like chat through options with me, we can get you what you need.
And I also appreciate the fact that, as I mentioned, I have made mistakes. The team of Connections is amazing. They think about everything. And I don't always think of when I need to think of in advance. And Sarah is really, really good about, again, showing grace, but saying like, here's how we can do this. It's a can do and a must do attitude combined with like, hey, as long as your mindset's in the right place, we're going to solve this. So I appreciate that very much.
Absolutely. This is a journey without a set destination. There's no such thing as perfect accessibility. And a lot of times you may encounter access friction between needs from different audiences, particularly with large groups. So you do the best that you can, and we just want to celebrate and support you where you are on that journey, always improving. And the technology changes, right? So language is fluid, technology changes. So we want to make sure that we're keeping up with best practices and standard operating procedures throughout the community and the industry. But I would say this comes from, my own personal history of masking or pushing through, not putting that hand up. And so I want to make sure no one else ever feels like they're in that position, that they can't get what they need because they don't want to put that hand up or they don't feel comfortable doing it.
No, we're so glad to have you. And let me just finish up here by saying that you heard episode 4 today. There's 2 episodes that are still coming.
2 more.
Noelle teased ahead to them a little bit here. Episode number 5 is on the subject of healthcare.
Yes.
And
we're talking about urgent care, insurance, gynecology, like we get into it. And then episode 6 is on housing, but it's also about, differences when you've acquired a disability because of violence and how that can also shape how you're treated versus, if you're paralyzed in a different way.
Okay. You're going to hate me asking, but do we know when the episodes are dropping yet?
Next month. I think it's every
next
month and the month after that.
Okay. One in May and one in June to wrap. Does that sound about right?
I want to say it's May 11th is the next one. In June, it's usually the second Monday
of each month. Yes.
There you go.
And then they'll live on for, I don't know,
YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Perpetuity. I was going to ask where people
Perpetuity.
Where do you want people to find? And I guess the answer is going to be different for the audience because, again, you can access it in different ways. But let's close with that. Sarah, you want to mention again, where can people access?
So I would have you go to movetoinclude.org.
Okay.
That's our local page for everything we're doing. It's the podcast, it's the inclusion desk, it's all of the things we're doing here locally with Move to Include. So movetoinclude.org.
All right, you're caught up to speed there. Sarah Murphy Abbamonte, project manager for Move to Include. Nice to see you in the studio digs here as always. Thanks for being here.
And in the afternoon, Evan, which is always a pleasure.
I know, yeah. Usually Sarah and I are like on pledge early in the morning, so this is late in the day for us. And Noelle Evans, host of the Move to Include podcast, education reporter, producer for WXXI News. I know you're going to keep up the outstanding work with this. Congratulations on the series so far.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And from all of us at Connections, it is a great team. And from all of us, thank you for being with us on these various platforms. We're back with you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.